We're joined now by Caleb Maupin, political analyst, journalist, and founder of Center for Political Innovation. He's the author of many, many books, and joining us now to talk about Russia and Ukraine. Caleb, so welcome to the show.
Sure, glad to be here.
So you were just at a press conference with Kirill Dmitriev, who's the special representative envoy for foreign investment. And this just comes on the announcement by the Trump administration that two gas companies are going to be sanctioned in about a month. What's going on? What's the current state of play in terms of any kind of peace deal concerning Russia and Ukraine?
Well, Kirill Dmitriev, who is the CEO of the Russia Direct Investment Fund, he just arrived here in New York City. And he was on his way to a meeting that was held with unnamed officials from the Trump administration, and he took the opportunity to speak to the press. Now, when he was speaking, he emphasized that this meeting was going forward regardless. You know, the Budapest meeting between Trump and Putin, it was put on hold. You know, it was canceled, but Trump says he wants to have the meeting in the future. The Russian president said it was more of a rescheduling than a cancellation. And this meeting apparently was scheduled before Budapest, and it proceeded as usual. Now, he emphasized when he spoke to the press, he emphasized the fact that the sanctions that have just been put on Russia, they're targeting two major oil companies, and it's going to be the American people who pay for it at the gas tank. It'll make the price of oil go up, and energy costs will go up. The more, the scarcity of oil on the market makes the price go up, basic supply and demand. So if you sanction some oil companies, as a result, there's going to be less oil on the market, and the gas prices will go up. And he said this isn't going to help the American people. It's not in the spirit of improving relations to put unilateral sanctions on a country. China has already denounced those sanctions as well. They're already having an impact on the international oil markets. Now, Kirill Dmitriev also emphasized that it was the British that are holding up the talks. He said that it is Britain and Britain's allies that are trying to prevent an improvement of relations between the USA and Russia, that Ukraine was the primary entity holding up relations, but they were doing it explicitly on behalf of the British. And they named Boris Johnson in particular, that Boris Johnson and his associates are pressuring Ukraine and pressuring other allies in Europe to make these negotiations difficult, and that it was the British. I mean, he put it squarely on the British. He made no bones about it. Now, before he left, he did answer a question from a Russian reporter about the Friendship Bridge, or the idea of a peace tunnel underneath the Bering Sea. And he said that due to Elon Musk's technological breakthroughs, it would be a lot more affordable, a lot less expensive, and that the idea of connecting the United States to Russia via a bridge connecting Alaska to the Russian Far East over the Bering Sea seems a lot more realistic, and that Elon Musk is a key player in possibly making that dream a reality. It's been discussed for over 100 years. The closest we got was the talk of a friendship bridge during the Kennedy administration, but he's saying it's very possible right now, and that the technological details of how this infrastructure project could be carried out are being discussed.
Right. So President Putin has called the new U.S. sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil an unfriendly act, and warned Moscow would never make any concessions under pressure. What does this response reveal about the limits of sanctions as a diplomatic tool, especially against a regime that defines defiance as a core part of its political identity?
Well, I think the important thing to understand is that Putin fixed Russia's economy by restructuring it around state-run oil and gas companies, right? These two, gas companies and oil companies, they're private, but they're basically facilitated by the Russian government. Russian President Vladimir Putin wrote his academic thesis on Dirgism, the economic theories in France, the idea of having what you call a national champion, a gigantic company facilitated by the government that is used to stimulate the rest of the economy. And that's what Putin did. That's, kind of how he rescued Russia from the disaster of the fall of the Soviet Union, was he created a giant energy sector that was controlled by the state, that then used that energy revenue to, rebuild the industries, to subsidize other parts of the economy. And so targeting the energy sector, I mean, Russia is now a major oil competitor. And that's partially what drives the hostility to Russia on the part of the United States. They're selling oil on the international markets, and every barrel of oil they sell is a barrel of oil somebody didn't buy from ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. So these sanctions, they serve to advance the agenda of American business, right? It makes it so people will have to buy from America rather than from Russia. And it's going to drive the oil prices up because it means there's going to be less oil on the market. China has already lowered its imports of Russian oil, in effect, because of these sanctions. China denounced the sanctions. Other countries have denounced them. It's not helping. It serves an economic purpose. It has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. It's really not going to change very much. It's simply an economic move by the United States.
A U.S. official told Seymour Hersh in a recent article that U.S.'s oil revenues have plunged, earning as little as $2 per barrel due to drone strikes on refineries and reduced refining capacity. How credible are these claims about Russia's financial crisis, and what evidence supports or contradicts the idea that Putin is running out of economic options?
I don't buy that. I think that Russia has kind of structured itself in preparation for this kind of economic warfare from the United States. Their economy did not collapse or really suffer as many anticipated when Biden first imposed the sanctions, and when there was kind of a rallying effort by the Biden administration to just completely isolate Russia. It didn't work. Countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like India just refused to cooperate. Even Israel didn't cooperate against Russia the way the United States was hoping. So I don't think that Russia is on the brink of collapse or anything like that. I think that, yes, they are suffering because of these sanctions imposed by the United States, trying to restrict their energy sector, but they're going to survive and they're going to keep going. And the BRICS economy has gotten stronger.
A European expert told Hersh in the same article that Putin's strategy is to be nice to Trump to prevent the US from sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Do you see signs that Putin is successfully manipulating Trump's foreign policy decisions? And how might this affect Ukraine's leverage in future negotiations?
Well, again, the message that Kirill Dmitriev gave was that Ukraine was acting on behalf of the British, and they emphasized that it was Britain that was really trying to undermine the talks, and that that Boris Johnson and other British officials were working not just with Ukraine, but with other countries to manage this. Now, a point that has been emphasized elsewhere is that, Russia cannot just negotiate the borders with Ukraine. They can't just negotiate that because the territories of the new republics are now enshrined in the Russian constitution. So in order to change the borders of the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk Republic, Odessa, etc., you would have to change the Russian constitution. So the president of Russia can't just sign away Russian territory, and that's an important point to make. And so, these new republics that joined with Russia, they wanted to join with Russia in 2014. They wanted Russia to move in and protect them back then, and they didn't. And now, they waited and they waited and they waited, and then Russia finally moved in to protect them in 2022. Those new republics are constitutionally part of the Russian Federation. So any effort to move the borders from anywhere other than where Russia says those borders are and where the people of those republics voted for the borders to be is going to be complicated legally within the Russian Federation. It's going to have to go through the Russian Duma. It's going to require changes to the Constitution.
And meanwhile, Zelensky refuses to cede any land in peace talks. So what we've got now is a stalemate then.
Well, again, Ukraine's position from the beginning of this is they want to completely retake all kinds of territory that they consider to be theirs, including Crimea, and that's absurd. And all international observers have said the idea that Russia would leave Crimea, leave the Donbass, that's just not going to happen. That's just a complete delusion. And it's unrealistic. And then, the Russian president pointed out that the very borders of Ukraine were drawn by the Soviet Union. The only reason Crimea is part of Ukraine is because Russian leader Khrushchev, the Soviet leader Khrushchev, he gave Crimea to Russia after the death of Stalin in some kind of backroom deal, right? It was Lenin who first drew the borders of Ukraine. Stalin expanded Ukraine eastward, and then ultimately Khrushchev added Crimea to it. The very borders of Ukraine itself were drawn by the Soviet Union. So, these borders that have been redrawn over and over and over again, They are very, very arbitrary, but they're not arbitrary at this point in Russia. Now, at this point, the Russian Constitution says that they are in a certain place. Ukraine claims that they have all of what was considered Ukraine in 1991 at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union, but that's just not realistic on the battlefield at this point. So, Russia had a huge military base in Crimea, even before all of this started. At the time of the fall of the Soviet Union, the agreement was that Ukraine would get Crimea, but Russia would get to have their big military base there. And when the crisis in Ukraine happened in 2014, Crimea immediately voted to join with Russia because almost everyone living in the Crimean Peninsula, which is very small, is connected to the Russian military base somehow, whether they're doing business with it or whatever. And it was just almost a unanimous vote, for Ukraine, to lose Crimea. So the idea that they're going to somehow drive Russia out of Crimea, out of the Donbass, it's just not going to happen. It's not realistic.
Right. If we could just switch gears in the last 5 minutes I have with you, Caleb, we can just look at Venezuela, because I know you're very familiar with this country. U.S. military flew over a pair of supersonic heavy bombers off the coast, up to the coast of Venezuela on Thursday, a little over a week after another group of bombers made a similar journey. And Trump, speaking at the White House, said he'd bypass Congress rather than seek approval for his military campaign. And as we know, for 2 months, the US military has been building up a force of warships, fighter jets, bombers, marines, drones, and spy planes in the Caribbean Sea, the largest deployment there for decades. What are we looking at Trump, sending the Marines to Venezuela? Is that going to be the next step, or do you think he won't take it?
There are three possible outcomes. Right now, we see the Trump administration targeting boats off the coast of Venezuela. There are three possible outcomes. One is that we'll see a repeat of what happened in Trump's first administration, which is that there was an escalation, and then they moved on to focusing on other foreign policy theaters. The second is that there could be airstrikes on Venezuela, which would be disastrous, probably done under the pretext of opposing drugs. That would be a disaster. That would be a huge violation of international law. Venezuela has not attacked the United States. It would be completely unacceptable. And the third option would be kind of what you mentioned there, like an actual ground invasion of Venezuela. A ground invasion of Venezuela would be an absolute disaster. It would be a disaster because there's already a problem with, chaos and drug cartels and migrants in South and Central America. If you were to take a major country like Venezuela and get rid of the central government and blow it to bits, the chaos and people fleeing would be massive. Furthermore, Colombia says it will militarily defend Venezuela. Venezuela has a whole bunch of Chinese tanks. They've got Chinese fighter jets, and the Wagner Group from Russia, which is the private military force, they are deployed in Venezuela. And Venezuela has the Bolivarian militias. Every neighborhood has a local rifle club that's loyal to Maduro. So basically, a lot of Americans would come home in body bags, and there would be a huge amount of chaos throughout the region, and other countries throughout the region and throughout the world would get involved. So if there is a direct actual invasion of Venezuela, we're looking at a World War III scenario. We're looking at millions more refugees. We're looking at all kinds of instability. It would be very, very bad.
So who is Trump trying to appease by sort of creating all this theater?
Well, it's been revealed that there has been a fight within the Trump administration about Venezuela. Marco Rubio, he wants an escalation against Venezuela, but Wyckoff, who is Trump's key negotiator, is opposed. And the two have been fighting behind closed doors, and that's what has been revealed. It's also interesting that Laura Loomer, who is close to Donald Trump, she has been emphasizing that she is opposed to an attack on Venezuela because she says Venezuela has been key in negotiating the release of the hostages, and that Venezuela functioned as a back channel between the United States and Hamas, and that it would be harmful to the peace process in the Middle East for Trump to attack Venezuela. That's what Laura Loomer said, and she's somebody who is known to be quite close to the White House, a very pro-Israel voice on social media. And she's saying that basically it would hurt Israel for the USA to actually attack Venezuela this time, which is quite interesting. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. But ultimately, it's clear there's disagreements within the administration. Marco Rubio is a Cuban-American from the Cuban exile community that has a real bone to pick with Venezuela, with Cuba, with Nicaragua, with all the countries that are part of that left of South America, the Latin American, Marxist left. He has an agenda in particular and a constituency to please in South Florida, but we'll see how far this goes.
Caleb Maupin, thank you as always. Very insightful. Love your analysis. Grateful you could be on the show. I know you've had a busy morning. We'll have you on again, no doubt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.